Sales is all about communication, and when you can communicate the value of the product that you're offering the buyer, and the buyer agrees that this value outweighs the costs of doing business with you, and the scales tip up in that direction, well, then the buyer, they're going to buy from you. It makes sense, right? It's pretty much as simple as that. So why is it then that when Sam sells exactly the same product as Walt, Walt is always closing deals and Sam is constantly falling flat on his face when he's presenting to buyers? Walt has more success with his sales presentations because communicating this value right here to the buyer, well, there's more to it than just mentioning a few features and benefits and hoping that the sale comes in. So do you want to know the 5-step process to putting together a sales presentation that buyers applaud and they buy from because they see this value right here? Then stay tuned. Hi, my name is Will Barron. I'm the founder of salesman.org, where we help sales professionals master the modern B2B sales process in just 42 days. Head over to salesman.org if you want to check that out. Now, whether you're selling in person, in the boardroom, or over the phone, all salespeople have to present their product to the buyer at some point in the sales process. And our job as sales professionals is to effectively communicate the value that our product delivers to the buyer, which makes this buying decision a really simple, easy one. This makes sense, right? This idea of the scale is not too complicated. I think most salespeople can get on board with this. So with all that said, how do we then create an effective sales presentation that allows us to communicate this value? So I'm going to give you in this video a very quick and simple structure to use, and you can create an effective sales presentation using these 5 different segments. First up, you need #1, a relatable statement. Next, you're going to use number 2. You're going to use some context. Then number 3, you're going to build into all of this a bit of a story. Number 4, we're going to take a look at some fact statements. And finally, we're going to wrap up our presentation with the obvious, right? The next steps for the buyer. And very, very honestly here, most salespeople miss the relatable statement. They miss the context. Perhaps they're using a customer story, which is great. It works fantastic. But most salespeople start with the facts and then the next steps, at which point they try and close the sale. But if you don't have all of this done ahead of time, then the close is going to be very difficult. So let me explain the point of each one of these steps in the presentation structure, and I'll give you a quick example of how this could be used as well. So the very first element of your sales presentation should be a statement, what we call the relatable statement, a statement that everyone can agree on. Now, the point of this relatable statement is to position the buyer and yourself as being on the same team, rather than what happens in most sales engagements, whereas you've got you and the buyer and you're set up as enemies. If you don't set up your presentation this way with a relatable statement, then your buyer's just going to be constantly looking for ways to object to everything that you're saying, rather than seeing things as being on the same side as you and the same picture. If you don't start your sales presentation this way, the buyer is going to be looking to constantly object to everything that you say, rather than looking for opportunities to agree with you. Because this relatable statement that you're going to use at the top, it could be something like, fighting in the street is never a clever idea, or fighting in the street is a really dumb thing to do. It's very difficult to not agree with that, right? That's the point of this part of the presentation. The second part of your sales presentation moves from this relatable statement that everyone agrees on of fighting in the street is never a clever idea, and into the specific area of the topic that you want to talk about within your presentation. And we want to make the start of our presentations very broad and agreeable, and then start to narrow down the topic here so the buyer doesn't get lost or turned off at the very beginning of the presentation and start ignoring us. I want you to imagine this. Imagine that we're out hiking with the buyer and we want to guide them down a gradually narrowing path. that's got steep drops either side of it. And if we were to dump the buyer on the narrowest part of the path to begin the hike, the beginning of the sales presentation, they'd get scared and they wouldn't continue along the path. But when we start with a nice, wide, comfortable part of the path and we gently guide them to the scarier, narrow bits, well, they're more likely to stick with us and make it through to the end. So an example of using context here to narrow down the conversation from our relatable statement, which was fighting in the street is a stupid idea, we could say something like, learning a little self-defense could get you out of those sticky situations. Next up, we're going to start to lead with a story. So now that we've got agreement from the buyer that we're on the same team and we've slowly built a little bit of context into the presentation so that we don't scare them away, it's time to start presenting the benefits of our product through a story. Not a slideshow with a list of bullet points. No, we need to use a story. And we want to present our product through either a fictional character or a real customer story because it allows the buyer to add their own layer of emotion to the presentation. And you can't get emotions from a PowerPoint slideshow with a list of features and benefits in bullet point format. There's zero emotion there. So let me give you an example of this. Our story could be that, well, Sam was attacked on his way home from work, but he knew a little bit of self-defense from a couple of years of training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so he managed to throw the attacker on his head, he defended himself, and he made a quick getaway. So at this point in the presentation, we have shared a relatable statement so that we're on the same page as the buyer. They're not objecting to everything that we say by default. They're hopefully giving us the benefit of the doubt with everything that we're saying, and they're excited to hear more. We've narrowed down the context of the conversation from something that's broad into something more related to our product. We've added a story, whether it's a customer story or an avatar that you've created to demonstrate the features and benefits of the product or the big picture of why they should buy from you. It's only at this point now that we start to include some facts. And this could include a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. At this point, the buyer should be hooked. And again, this is when we can start to mention specific features or benefits or even the pricing of our product. Now we can start focusing on the how of our product, whereas up here we've been focusing on the why. We've been focusing on why we should work together, the problem that we're solving. And again, now we can start to focus on the how we're going to solve the physical problem itself. So for example, we could say as a fact statement, you'd think that the confidence of being able to defend himself, Sam, would be priceless. But no, it only costs $50 a month at your local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. So do you see here how we've wrapped up the story and we've now added features, benefits, and price into the conversation. And so the sales pitch is now starting to heat up a little bit. And finally, after getting agreement, building context, letting the buyer add a little bit of emotion through picturing themselves in the story, and then we start to explain some of the facts as well through fact statements, well, we're now going to start to show the next steps of how the buyer can work with us. So if this is a sales presentation, at the end of the sales process, we might just ask for the business here. So for example, I could say that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has changed Sam's life. Does it make sense to sign up to the gym today and change yours? So there we have it. There are the 5 steps to creating a sales presentation that your buyers will pay attention to and buy from. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, or why not click one of the videos that are on the screen right now to continue your own sales education.